one-man army trope is commonly found in action films where our action heroes in many ways transcend human limits and are more akin to weapons than humans, fighting off hordes of bad guys with a single weapon or, in some cases, their bare hands. They are lone wolves with the power of the entire pack. Other than having the capacity for extreme violence, the characters in this trope are also fiercely independent, self-reliant, rebellious, and intelligent. The one-man army trope highlights the power of the individual and seemingly flips the popular idiom, "no man is an island," on its head. It is a fantasy of heroism that appeals to many of us, but particularly seems to appeal to the male ideal. The article Good Guys with Guns, Hegemonic Masculinity and Concealed Handguns by Angela Stroud states, "The warrior ethos was an extension on the larger cultural shift that linked masculinity to muscularity and physical toughness. The body is central to how this operates because, to be fully appropriately masculine, a male person must exhibit physical control of his space and be able to act on objects and bodies in it." Action films have always placed a great emphasis on the male physique, portraying them as well chiseled and muscular, playing into the fantasies the audience already has and creating new ones. Muscularity is used to signal strength and masculinity. Rambo was the paragon of this. He represented a hardcore, hypermasculine man from his physicality to his behavior. Most characters within this trope don't quite match up to him in terms of muscularity, but they all have an almost superhuman level of physical toughness. Take Levi Ackerman, for example, whose physique stands in direct contrast with Rambo and the archetypal action hero, yet he possesses all the physical prowess. They are all portrayed as possessing incredible strength and durability, as well as other characteristics associated with hegemonic masculinity. Many of the characters that fall into this trope have military backgrounds or were trained in a similar fashion. They share a lot with the concept of the super soldier. According to TV tropes, the super soldier is a soldier specifically intended to be above and beyond a normal man. Harder, better, faster, stronger, tougher, more skilled, more determined, built and trained to fight. The concept of the super soldier in fiction is generally portrayed as some sort of man-made android or a genetically modified human programmed to be a killing machine. While some characters in this trope do fall under this umbrella, most do not, but the idea of being above and beyond a normal human being is persistent, and especially given the militaristic background of many of these characters, it's hard not to draw a parallel. Masculinity in particular and patriarchy in general are presented in films in manifold ways. Since masculinity is best observable in male-dominated environments, i.e. military environments and war films, such filmic narratives offer better opportunities to analyze an ideological masculinist discourse. It makes sense then why these characters have military ties. They represent the masculine ideal, and masculinity and militarism are closely associated. It's also used by the writers to signify that this character is tough and to give their actions more believability. Because these characters not only represent masculinity, but an idealized version of it, they aren't just strong, they are the strongest. They represent an unattainable level of physical strength and prowess. A large aspect of this trope is to serve as a power fantasy for the viewers. We enjoy watching these characters do things that are largely impossible, because there is an allure to that untouchable aura that they exude. This allure isn't limited to a male audience, though that is a demographic that this fantasy tends to be targeted towards.
Cinematic identification involves two different tendencies. First, there is that of dreaming and fantasy that involve the multiple and contradictory tendencies within the construction of the individual. Second, there is the experience of narcissistic identification with the image of a human figure perceived as other. Both these processes are invoked in the conditions of cinema. The spectator does not therefore identify with the hero or heroine, an identification that would, if put in its conventional sense, involve socially constructed males identifying with male heroes and socially constructed females identifying with women heroines. The situation is more complex than this, as identification involves both the recognition of self in the image on the screen, a narcissistic identification, and the identification of self with the various positions that are involved in the fictional narration, those of the hero and heroine, villain, bit part player, active and passive character. Identification is therefore multiple and fractured, a sense of seeing the constituent parts of the spectator's own psyche paraded before her or him.
For many people, the one-man army trope can be very empowering. It speaks to the parts of us that want to be extremely resourceful and dependable and projects those desires tenfold. The article Man of Action Heroes, The Pursuit of Heroic Masculinity in Everyday Consumption by Douglas B. Holt and Craig J. Thompson states, America's predominant masculine ideal is breadwinner masculinity. By supporting their families and conforming to bureaucratic mandates of a corporate economy, men earn respect in social hierarchies. Breadwinner masculinity superseded a presumably more satisfying pre-corporate mode of masculinity that has retained plenty of currency in American culture. As possibilities to achieve breadwinner masculinity at work have shrunk, men have invested more and more of their identity into consumption, where they have more degrees of freedom to shroud themselves in the symbolic cloaks of autonomy. Men use the plasticity of consumer identity construction to forge atavistic masculine identities based upon an imagined life of self-reliant, pre-modern men who lived outside the confines of cities, families, and work bureaucracies. In the film Nobody, our main character Hutch Mansell goes from this rugged individualism to breadwinner masculinity to an attempt to marry both concepts by the end. During the brief period we see Hutch in full breadwinner mode, he is presented as downtrodden and lost. He and his family go through a home invasion, and when his teenage son tries to tackle the robbers, he tells him to stop and lets the invaders continue to carry out their acts and physically assault his son without interfering. He is emasculated by those around him because of this event, and that acts as the catalyst for him to go from the domestic everyday man to the one-man killing machine, a mode which he was previously in before settling down and having a more domestic lifestyle. It is only through enacting violence does Hutch feel revitalized. Hutch uses violence to regain his sense of masculinity, but in doing so puts his family at risk, thereby symbolically disavowing the breadwinner status. By the end of the film, we see Hutch merge his home life and work life into one, forming this synthesis of breadwinning and rebellion, the man of action hero. The most celebrated men of American culture are neither breadwinners nor rebels. Instead, they draw from the best of both models, resolving tensions between breadwinning and rebellion in a utopian resolution. These heroic men of action embody the rugged individualism of the rebel while maintaining their allegiance to collective interests as required of breadwinners. This synthesis eludes the negative connotations that plague the models of breadwinner and rebel masculinity. There's a reason why the characters in this trope are lone wolves and generally severed from any sense of domesticity. Just because they can fight off every enemy doesn't mean that everyone else can. The lack of community is a feature, not a bug within the narrative. Its purpose is to highlight the power of the individual. It's not surprising that so many of the characters in this trope are defined as Sigma males and espouse highly individualistic ideals. Sigma male is a slang term used in masculinist subcultures for popular, successful, but highly independent and self-reliant men. The Sigma male accepts that he does not need power over others as the alpha male desires, but rather he needs only power to control himself and preserve his own autonomy. The characters that fall into the one-man army trope are lionized in culture not necessarily for their violent tendencies, but more so for the autonomy they have because of them. There is a great emphasis placed on self-reliance. Being independent and autonomous is a must for these characters, which is ironic because in a lot of these narratives, the characters are in a cat and mouse game or being used as pawns or shackled by their own emotional baggage. They feel as though their autonomy has been violated and they are fighting to regain absolute control over their own lives. Violence is merely a means to an end, not the end itself. At its worst, the trope can be a vapid power fantasy that Hollywood uses to spew shameless military propaganda. But at its best, I believe it can explore identity, importance of community, ideas of masculinity, and human potential.
Can't wait for this to be